She thought it was just another day off. Nurse Ava Ramirez was sipping her coffee at a quiet street cafe when chaos erupted. Gunshots rang out. Without thinking, she threw herself between a bullet and a stranger. She saved his life and nearly lost her own. But what Ava didn't know was that the man she rescued wasn't just a random passerby. He was Michael Grant, the secretive billionaire CEO of the very hospital where she worked. A man hiding his identity for reasons no one could guess. As Ava recovers, her story makes headlines, and Michael, driven by guilt and admiration, re-enters her life under a false name. What starts as an innocent connection soon spirals into a web of hidden truths, buried trauma, and undeniable chemistry. But when Ava discovers the truth, that the man she trusted has been lying all along, everything shatters. In a hospital teetering between scandal and salvation, can love survive betrayal? Can one act of courage spark a revolution of healing, redemption, and trust? This is not just a story about a bullet. It's about the scars we carry, the lies we tell, and the love we fight for when everything is on the line. Stay with us. It's just getting started. The fluorescent lights buzzed above, like always, humming their tired lullaby as Nurse Ava Ramirez weaved through the corridors of St. Gabriella's Medical Center. The air smelled of antiseptic and coffee, her two most familiar companions. Her shift had started 12 hours ago, and yet, as she adjusted a child's IV line and offered a reassuring smile to a worried mother, she looked as composed as if she'd just arrived. That was Ava, calm in the chaos. She built her life around caring for others, especially after losing her mother to a botched surgery years ago. It wasn't just a job. For Ava, nursing was a promise to do better, to be better. But even the strongest promises wear thin, and exhaustion had started to cling to her bones. "Take a break," Carla urged, nudging her with a nudge that nearly sent the pen in Ava's pocket flying. 10 minutes, Ava replied with a smirk, pushing through the swinging doors of the staff lounge. Coffee in hand, she stared out the window that overlooked the city. A rare day off was waiting for her tomorrow, one she planned to spend doing absolutely nothing. Maybe she'd finally get that haircut, or better yet, sleep until the sun went down. The next morning was unusually serene. The city, often honking and roaring by 9 a.m., felt muted under a layer of soft gray clouds. Ava took a deep breath as she stepped out in jeans and a light jacket. No scrubs, no pager, no gloves. Just her, a to-go book of poetry, and the promise of silence. She walked to a small cafe tucked on the corner of 7th and Haven, a place she only visited on rare occasions, like today. A warm smile from the barista, a caramel latte, and a croissant later, Ava was sunk into a corner booth near the window. She let the hum of light conversation wash over her. For once, she was just a face in the crowd. Across the room, a man sat alone near the door. Mid-30s, crisp button-down shirt, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. Even though the sun hadn't made an appearance all morning, he looked out of place, too polished for this part of town. His fingers tapped his phone with a nervous rhythm, as if waiting for someone who might never come. Ava noticed him only briefly, her mind drifting back to her book, but fate had already set its stage. The door burst open, a shout echoed, a flash of movement. The man in the sunglasses stood quickly, but too late. A masked figure stormed in, waving a gun, screaming for wallets, phones, silence. Ava's breath caught in her throat. Her body tensed instinctively. She saw the man reach into his jacket. Was he armed, trying to call for help? "Don't move!" the gunman barked, leveling the weapon at the man near the door. Time snapped. The barrel twitched. Ava saw it somehow before it happened. She moved without thinking. A scream pierced the air as the gun fired. Ava lunged forward and collided with the stranger, knocking him down as a searing pain ripped through her shoulder. She didn't even feel herself hit the floor, just the burning fire where the bullet tore through muscle and blood. Panic surged around them. Chairs scraped, people ran, the gunman fled. Everything became a blurry noise. The man she saved crouched beside her, voice low and trembling. "Stay with me," he said, his sunglasses gone, revealing sharp gray eyes filled with shock. Ava tried to answer, but her world had already started to darken. Sirens howled in the distance, but it wasn't the kind she was used to hearing from behind hospital walls. This time, she wasn't the one treating the wound. This time, she was the patient, and the man she'd just saved. The man whispering her name, calling for help. She didn't know it yet, but he was no ordinary stranger. He was Michael Grant, the reclusive, anonymous CEO of St. Gabriella's Medical Center. And Ava's world was about to be turned upside down. Bright white lights blurred into her vision. Sharp, clinical smells invaded her senses before her eyelids managed to flutter open. The rhythmic beep of a heart monitor played beside her like an eerie lullaby. Ava blinked hard, and the ceiling tiles came into focus. It wasn't just any hospital room, it was her hospital, St. Gabriella's. She tried to move, but hissed in pain as her right arm throbbed viciously. Bandaged, immobilized, a bullet wound. Reality rushed back in like a flood. Gunshots, panic, the man in sunglasses. The stranger, her head lolled to the side. Nurse Carla stood nearby, hands on hips and eyes full of fire and worry. "God, Ava," Carla breathed, "you scared the hell out of us. What the hell were you thinking?" I just reacted," Ava whispered. Her throat was dry, voice gravelly. "You took a bullet, Ava. You tackled a man you didn't even know." "I didn't do it for him," Ava murmured. "I did it because someone had to." Carla rolled her eyes, but there was admiration under the exasperation. Hero complex, always had it. A tap came from the door. A man stood there with a bouquet in hand, face unreadable. Neatly dressed, clean-shaven, but there was something haunted in his eyes. Carla looked between him and Ava. "You want to see her?" "Yes, please, just a moment," the man said softly. Carla hesitated, then stepped aside. 5 minutes. Ava squinted. Recognition danced on the edges of her memory. The eyes, the jawline. "You were there," she said. "Yes," he replied, stepping forward, setting the flowers on the side table. "And you saved my life." She tried to sit up straighter, but he gently motioned for her to stay still. "My name's Mike," he said. "I just wanted to thank you in person. No cameras, no media, just me." "You don't seem like a Mike," Ava murmured. He chuckled faintly. "No one's ever said that to me before." "You okay?" "I'm fine, because of you, but you nearly died for me." "I would have done it for anyone." That answer struck something deep in him. He nodded, jaw clenched slightly. "I'll let you rest," he said, backing toward the door. "But thank you, Ava. I'll never forget what you did." He was gone before she could ask him anything else. Ava stared at the door, heart pounding harder than it should. She had questions, and something told her Mike wasn't just some guy at a cafe. Something told her she'd be seeing him again. Michael Grant leaned against the hallway wall, his fists clenched in his pockets. He'd rehearsed that conversation a dozen times. None of it had gone as planned. He had meant to leave the hospital anonymously, to thank her quietly and disappear. But the moment he saw her face again, her strength, her calm, even in pain, he knew he couldn't walk away so easily. She didn't know who he was. That was both a blessing and a problem. Michael hadn't intended to be recognized. For the past 2 years, he had operated behind the scenes as CEO, letting the hospital's public-facing board and administrative staff handle appearances. His identity was known to a select few, and for good reason. There had been threats, real ones, connected to a whistleblower case he helped expose during his acquisition of the hospital chain. Going public meant risk, but something about Ava Ramirez was pulling him out of the shadows. Back inside the room, Ava's thoughts churned. She grabbed the nurse call button with her good hand and summoned Carla. "That guy, Mike, do you know who he is?" Carla shook her head. "He's not in the patient log. I figured he was family." "No, he wasn't. He just—" Ava paused. "He knew my name, brought me flowers. Something about him felt controlled." Carla raised an eyebrow. "Ava, I love you, but maybe wait until the morphine wears off before you start diagnosing your mystery hero." "I'm serious," Ava said. Something about him didn't feel like a stranger. Later that night, as Ava drifted in and out of pain-numbed sleep, she dreamt of rooftops, alarms, and eyes full of secrets. The cafe, the bullet, the blur of motion. It replayed over and over, and in each version, the man she shielded from the bullet was standing tall in a boardroom, not a coffee shop, behind tinted glass, hidden in plain sight. Michael stared at the skyline from the top floor of the Grant Corporation's private suite, technically part of St. Gabriella's, though rarely visited by anyone other than him. His personal office remained untouched by the usual traffic of hospital administration. From this perch, he watched the world, stayed informed, and stayed hidden. But ever since that day, the day she took a bullet for him, Michael hadn't been able to stop watching her. Ava Ramirez, registered nurse, 5 years at St. Gabriella's. No complaints on her record, glowing reviews from patients and peers alike. Fiercely loyal, fiercely brave. He reread her file for the 3rd time that morning. She was more than a hero in headlines. She was a force. He hadn't meant to get close. He'd lived too long behind the curtain to risk exposure now. But seeing her in pain, for his sake, something in him cracked open. So that night, under the cover of hospital shadows, he returned to her room again. No flowers this time, just himself. Ava was awake, a light casting soft gold across her face as she flipped through her notebook, a nurse's habit she hadn't shaken even while recovering. "You're back," she said, voice flat but curious. "I didn't want to leave things the way I did." "Still no last name?" Michael hesitated. "Call me Mike, just Mike." Ava frowned. "You know, most grateful strangers don't show up twice." "I'm not most." "No kidding." A beat passed, then another. "I came to say thank you, properly," he added. "I don't need thanks," she said. "Just answers." Michael took a breath. I was there on business, confidential stuff. I shouldn't have been there. But you stepped in without knowing me. You didn't even blink. That's what we do, Ava replied. It's who we are. Nurses, I mean. He nodded. Still, that kind of bravery doesn't come from training. She held his gaze. What do you want from me, Mike? Nothing, he said honestly. Just a chance to make sure you're okay. That's all. And for the first time, Ava saw something in his eyes that didn't match the polished shirt and practiced charm. Guilt. Real, unfiltered guilt. Okay, she said quietly, but if you're hiding something, don't bring it near my floor. Michael smiled faintly. Deal. He turned to go, his footsteps silent, and Ava, for reasons she couldn't explain, wished he'd stayed just a minute longer. Michael, this is a mistake, said Edgar Lynn, the hospital's legal counsel, pushing a file across the polished boardroom table. You're already under scrutiny for running the hospital from the shadows. Being in the middle of a public shooting linked to one of our nurses, it's dangerous. Michael leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled in front of him. I didn't plan for a nurse to take a bullet for me, Edgar. I didn't even expect to be recognized. She didn't recognize you, did she? Michael shook his head. Number. But she suspects something. Then we have a problem. Michael looked out the window to the skyline again. We have a bigger one if we lose her. Ava's more than a nurse. She's the spirit of this place. If we let her go or scare her off, we lose something important. Edgar raised a skeptical brow. And what exactly is she to you? Michael didn't answer. He couldn't, because even he didn't know. Meanwhile, Ava had been discharged under strict instructions to rest. Carla drove her home, refusing to let her take the bus like she usually did. You're not a superhero, Carla muttered as they walked up Ava's apartment steps. I never said I was. You didn't have to. Look, I know this is going to sound nuts, but you ever get the sense that guy, Mike, was watching you even before the shooting? Ava paused, key halfway in the lock. I don't know what I feel, she admitted, but he's hiding something, and I hate mysteries. That night, Ava couldn't sleep. She flipped through her medical notes, tried to distract herself with the mundane, but Mike kept slipping into her mind. There was a coldness beneath his warmth, like a man trained to be charming but not to trust, like someone used to lying elegantly. She did a background check with what little she had, the face, the suit, the Mike Green name he'd slipped in during conversation. Nothing solid came up, no social media, no business registry, no coffee shop receipt with his name. The man was a ghost, and Ava had been shot saving a ghost. At sunrise, Michael stood in the corridor near the ICU, coat slung over his shoulder. He didn't need to be here, but he couldn't stay away. Watching nurses shuffle in, patients being wheeled out, lives beginning and ending every day. It reminded him why he'd taken this secret job in the first place. To protect the hospital his brother died in. To rebuild it from the inside. And now, to protect her. But sooner or later, Ava Ramirez would learn who he really was. And when she did, Michael wasn't sure if she'd forgive him or walk away for good. Ava stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, fingers gently brushing over the bandage on her shoulder. The wound was healing, but the tightness in her chest, the flashes of that cafe, the sound of the gunshot, hadn't faded. Every time she closed her eyes, she was there again, watching it all unfold. She had always handled stress well. That's what they all said about her at the hospital. Unshakable Ava. But what no one ever talked about, what no one ever asked, was what happened after the adrenaline wore off. What happened when the silence settled in? What happened when the hero couldn't sleep? She had dreams now, not always of the shooting. Sometimes it was her mother's face, pale under fluorescent hospital lights. Sometimes it was the stranger's gray eyes staring at her through smoke and screams. She shook her head and turned away from the mirror, gripping the sink for balance. It wasn't just the pain in her body that left her unsteady. It was something deeper, something buried. Her phone buzzed. A text from Carla. ER's slammed. Not saying come back, but if you do, we'll make sure you're treated like royalty. Ha 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 ha. Ava smirked, thumbs hovering above the screen. Then another message came through from an unknown number. How are you feeling, Mike? She stared at it for a long moment. She hadn't given him her number. Had he pulled it from hospital records? A part of her wanted to ignore it. Another part didn't. She replied, better, still breathing. You? Seconds later, grateful and glad to hear it. Simple, measured, polished, just like him. But what kind of man knew how to disappear from a digital footprint? And why did she feel like every word he typed had more weight than he was letting on? Ava wasn't supposed to be back for another week, but she showed up anyway. Carla spotted her from across the nurse's station and nearly dropped her tablet. You're not cleared yet. I'm not doing heavy lifting, Ava said, slipping on her badge. Just paperwork, maybe some admin tasks. That's okay with you, or do I have to wrestle someone for a clipboard? Carla rolled her eyes, then hugged her tightly, carefully. You're stubborn as hell. Comes with the job. Word traveled fast. By noon, nearly everyone in the hospital knew Ava was back on light duty. Doctors dropped by just to thank her again. Some brought coffee, one brought donuts shaped like little Band-Aids. And then, mid-shift, she saw him. Mike was standing by the nurses' board, dressed in a button-up and slacks, talking to Dr. Holt like he belonged there. No visitor badge, no clipboard, just confidence. Her eyes narrowed. What's he doing here? She whispered to Carla. Carla raised a brow. That guy? Apparently he's some kind of hospital systems consultant, hired last minute, quiet guy, knows way too much for someone new. Ava walked over before she could talk herself out of it. Mike, she said. He turned, surprise flickering briefly before he recovered. Ava, you're back. You too, huh? Consultant now? He smiled easily. I told you I was here on business. Thought I'd stay a bit longer, help out. Seems like this place could use a few extra hands. Oh, so now you're an expert on hospital logistics? She asked, arms crossed. I have a few insights, he said calmly, and some experience in organizational strategy. You're full of surprises. He tilted his head. Is that a bad thing? It depends, she said softly, eyes locked on his. Are there more coming? Before he could answer, Dr. Holt called him away. Ava stood there watching him walk off, the knot in her gut tightening. That man was not a consultant. He moved like someone who owned the building. And she was going to find out exactly who he was. Returning to the hospital in scrubs, even if only for light duty, felt like slipping into a version of herself that Ava hadn't seen in weeks. The halls were busy, the scent of disinfectant oddly comforting, and her nurse's badge still clipped perfectly onto her front pocket. But everything felt slightly off. It wasn't the wound that was healing, it was him. Mike. She had watched him all morning, shadowing meetings, taking notes during board rounds, even offering advice to upper-level staff. More than once she caught him slipping into conversations with surprising authority. It wasn't just how he talked, it was how everyone listened. Too confident, too polished, too informed. And yet, he still brought her coffee that afternoon. Vanilla almond milk latte, exactly how she liked it. "You remembered," she said as he handed it over. "You mentioned it, briefly, 3 weeks ago. Do you always remember things women say to you in passing?" "Only the important ones." She raised an eyebrow but didn't respond. They stood in the break room in a silence that wasn't awkward, but wasn't quite comfortable either. The energy between them had changed, charged, a little too warm. "How long are you staying?" she asked finally. Mike hesitated. "Depends. There's still work to be done here." "Funny. You talk like you run the place." His smile faltered, just slightly. "I just care about it," he said. "Places like this, they matter, more than most people realize." Ava studied him carefully. "You care, but no one's ever seen you before this week. You don't have a background in our system. No one knows who hired you." Mike set his coffee down and leaned slightly forward, voice lower. "What are you really asking, Ava?" "I'm asking why a man who has the posture of a CEO and the resume of a ghost is suddenly hanging around my floor." There it was. The moment he could tell her the truth. But he didn't. Not yet. Instead, he smiled with frustrating calm. "Maybe I just wanted to see the nurse who saved my life and stayed to save everyone else's." Before she could answer, her pager buzzed. "Emergency in pediatrics." "They need extra hands," she said, already moving. Mike stepped aside, but his eyes followed her until she disappeared around the corner. He'd lied, but only because he didn't know how to tell her the truth. Not yet. Back in his private office, high above the hospital floors, Michael tossed his blazer onto the couch and exhaled sharply. He was losing control of the narrative. Ava was sharp, sharper than anyone else he'd dealt with since he'd taken this job in secret. She didn't just notice details, she connected them. He poured himself a glass of water and paced. What was his end game? When he first stepped into the role of anonymous CEO, after inheriting the hospital network, his goal was simple: restore faith, build something better, and protect it from greed and corruption. Staying hidden allowed him to work without being targeted by the press or his enemies. But now Ava had become a complication, a good complication. He couldn't stop thinking about her, her courage, her questions, the way she made him feel like he couldn't hide anymore. And yet, exposure could ruin everything. If the staff found out they'd been working under a disguised executive, there would be fallout, lawsuits, press inquiries. The board might force him out entirely. He looked down at the hospital below. He couldn't risk losing Ava, but he also couldn't risk the hospital, unless... He returned to his desk and opened his secure email system. He typed, "To Edgar Lynn, subject, contingency plan. Edgar, we may need to prepare for the possibility of disclosure. Draft me a strategy for public admission, with protections for staff morale, legal insulation, and community outreach. Also, Run a quiet background on Ava Ramirez. Nothing invasive, just I need to understand who she is. Magyarország. He hesitated before hitting send. This wasn't about investigating her. It was about protecting what he was starting to feel for her and for the hospital. And deep down he knew he was walking a razor's edge. One step wrong, and it would all come crashing down. The ER was buzzing. A multi-vehicle crash had just rolled in. 3 trauma patients, 2 critical. Nurses shouted codes, doctors barked orders, and gurneys squeaked down the hallway at full speed. And Ava Ramirez was right in the middle of it. Despite her injury, she moved fast, directing staff, assisting where she could without compromising her recovery. Her presence was magnetic, calming some, motivating others. She wasn't just good at her job. She led with instinct. Michael watched from a few feet away, dressed in scrubs he had borrowed from the admin locker room. He had no medical license, but enough shadowing experience from the last year to know when he could step in with logistics and when to get out of the way. Today, however, Ava wasn't letting him linger in the background. "Mike," she shouted, glancing at a clipboard, "you said you were good with floor layouts. Where's the quickest route from Oregon Route 2 to intensive care unit without crossing the main corridor?" He answered before thinking. "Take the maintenance elevator. Use code 717, security override. You'll bypass the corridor entirely." She blinked. "You knew that awfully fast." "Came across it when analyzing hospital schematics," he lied. "You analyzed schematics?" He shrugged. "It's part of what I do." Later, when the patients were stabilized and the ER calmed, Ava found him in the back hall, sipping a sports drink like he hadn't just been casually dropping classified access codes. "You ever plan on telling me what exactly it is you do, Mike?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Hospital optimization, internal systems, infrastructure planning. See, that's what gets me," she said. "You're a little too fluent in our building. You handle stress like a trauma surgeon. You can't be just another consultant." He leaned against the wall, folding his arms. "You don't trust me." "I don't trust people who dodge straight answers." Michael studied her, strong posture, chin high, eyes sharp with curiosity, and something else, concern. "I haven't lied to you, Ava," he said carefully. "But there are parts of my job I'm not allowed to discuss." "That's convenient." "It's necessary." She turned to leave, but paused. "You know what the problem is with secrets?" "What?" "They don't stay buried, especially around people like me." He watched her walk away, pulse thudding faster than it should. Ava was no ordinary nurse. She was the only person who could ruin his anonymity, or be the reason he chose to end it. Ava lay on her couch later that night, unable to sleep. Her shoulders still ached, but it was nothing compared to the gnawing sense of something off she couldn't shake. She replayed Mike's movements, his phrasing, the casual authority in his tone. He had used a security override like it was second nature. He didn't flinch at trauma. He didn't look surprised when senior surgeons deferred to him in meetings. And nobody outside executive leadership even knew what Code 717 was. She grabbed her tablet and typed into the hospital's internal personnel directory, "Mike Green, consultant, temporary clearance." That was it. No background info, no department, no origin date. She chewed her lip, then opened a secure browser tab and searched again. Nothing. No LinkedIn. No academic records, no licensing database. It was like he'd been dropped into existence 6 weeks ago. Across town, Michael stood on the rooftop terrace outside his office. The stars were muted by the city glow, but the night was quiet. Edgar had responded to his request. The file on Ava sat open on his tablet. Nursing records, certifications, evaluations, even a note from a former mentor calling her the heart of the floor. He closed the file. He couldn't read anymore. It felt invasive, wrong. She was so transparent with the world, and he was still hiding. He pulled up the drafted press release on his secure drive. Michael Grant, CEO of St. Gabriella's, steps forward amid transparency campaign. He had written the headline himself, but it was still in draft. His finger hovered over the delete key. He wanted to tell her the truth, but he didn't know if he could handle her walking away after hearing it. Downstairs, Ava paced, phone in hand. She stared at Mike's number, and for a second, she almost called him, not to interrogate him, but to ask him who he really was. Then she thought better of it. She'd find the truth on her own, one layer at a time. Michael stood before the memorial plaque in the East Wing hallway, the one dedicated to those we lost too soon. Among the names etched in metal was one that stopped his heart every time he saw it. Lucas Grant, 1990, 2018. Resident trauma surgery, his younger brother, the reason Michael had hidden his identity. Lucas had been a rising star, brilliant, kind, tireless, and then a cascade of administrative negligence led to a delayed diagnosis of sepsis after a grueling 48-hour shift. He died 3 days later. The hospital had tried to bury it, dismissing it as an unfortunate accident. But Michael had uncovered the truth. The mismanaged schedules, the falsified logs, the ignored red flags. And when the board refused to act, he bought out their shares, one by one, quietly, efficiently. Within 6 months, he owned the hospital. He'd promised to fix it from the inside, but to do that, he had to disappear, let the hospital run publicly under a team of directors, while he rebuilt it from the shadows. Now Ava was starting to unravel that veil, and Michael was beginning to wonder if his greatest secret could ever survive her curiosity, or if he even wanted it to. Meanwhile, Ava had just wrapped her shift and was headed to the nurse's lounge when she passed by the administrative floor. A door stood slightly ajar, the one marked Private Access, Exec Clearance Only. Inside, a screen glowed faintly. She paused, listened. Silence. No footsteps, no voices. Curious, she stepped in. It wasn't snooping, she told herself, just information gathering. The desktop was unlocked, paused on a digital personnel file. She leaned in. Michael Grant, Executive Leadership, Chief Oversight Officer. Her stomach flipped. The photo, the face, it was him. Mike! Her heart slammed against her ribs. Her hands trembled. He wasn't a consultant. He was the man who ran the entire hospital, the man she saved, the man who lied. Ava backed out of the room slowly, heart pounding. She felt like the floor had been pulled out from under her. Everything suddenly made sense, and none of it did. He had looked her in the eye, talked about trust, thank you, shared moments that felt real. And all the while, he had been pretending. He had watched her, even worked beside her, without telling her the truth. She walked faster, breath sharp, tears stinging her eyes as she reached the elevator and stabbed the button. At that moment, the elevator opened, and there he was, Michael, holding 2 coffees. "Hey," he said with a hopeful smile, "I was just coming to find you. Thought you might need a pick-me-up." She stared at him, jaw tight, a dozen words pushing at the edge of her mouth. But none came out. He noticed the shift in her face, something raw and unsettled. "Ava?" he asked gently. "Are you okay?" She forced a nod. "I'm fine, just tired." He searched her eyes. "You sure?" "Positive," she said, brushing past him. "I'll see you around." She didn't look back. That night, Ava lay in bed, unable to close her eyes. He lied to her. But why? To protect himself? To manipulate her, or was it something more complicated? She grabbed her tablet again, pulled up the internal staff directory. This time when she typed Michael Grant, the page loaded with no error. The firewall was down. She scanned quickly. His investment history, administrative appointments, system-level override access. And then something stopped her cold. Chief Executive Oversight appointed, September 2018. In memoriam, note, Dr. Lucas Grant. She clicked the obituary. It described Lucas as a beloved trauma resident. His death was listed as sudden, but Ava knew better. She'd seen cases like his before. Silent tragedies created by toxic hospital culture. Michael hadn't come here for control. He had come for revenge. Or maybe redemption. Across town, Michael stood at his window again, staring at the city. He had seen it in her eyes. She knew. The question now wasn't whether she'd confront him. It was how, and when, and what would be left between them when she finally did. The emergency call came in at 9:47 p.m. A fire in a downtown apartment building. Mass casualties. Smoke inhalation, fractures, burns. The ER was bracing for impact. Ava had been on her way out. She stopped in the lobby when she saw the ambulances already lining up outside the trauma bay. She didn't even think. She turned and ran back in. Inside, chaos unfolded with surgical rhythm. Stretchers rolled in like waves, patients screaming, coughing, unconscious. Triage nurses moved fast. Respiratory therapists set up oxygen lines. Burn kits flew off the shelves. Ava donned gloves and tied her hair back. "Ramirez," a trauma doctor barked. "Room 3, burn patient 2nd degree across both arms." "On it," she shouted, grabbing a trauma kit. Then she saw him. Michael was across the ER, moving quickly, relaying patients to proper wings. His jacket was off, sleeves rolled up. He was working, coordinating with the efficiency of someone who understood both the system and the stakes. "You shouldn't be here," she said when they crossed paths near the meds cart. "I could say the same to you," he replied without stopping. Their eyes met just for a second. And despite everything she now knew, her heart still skipped a beat. They didn't have time for secrets right now. Only survival. 3 hours later, the pace slowed, adrenaline ebbed, patients stabilized. Ava found Michael in the staff break room, seated against the wall, wiping blood from his sleeve with a disposable wipe. His eyes were tired, jaw tense. "You didn't leave," she said softly. "Neither did you." A silence grew between them, thick with unspoken things. Ava took the seat beside him. "Why didn't you tell me who you were?" Michael exhaled slowly. I wanted to, every time, but I didn't know how. She nodded, jaw set. You let me believe you were just some guy, and I opened up to you. I trusted you. I know, he said, and I failed you. She looked at him sharply, surprised by the honesty. You're not just a CEO hiding in the shadows, she said. You're a man with grief in your bones and a mission in your veins. I saw the plaque. I read about your brother. Michael closed his eyes. I didn't want pity or admiration, just the chance to make something better. You were doing that, she whispered, but not alone. Not anymore. Their hands brushed, and for the first time since the shooting, Ava didn't pull away. The morning after the fire, Ava walked into the nurse's lounge to find Carla perched on the couch, coffee in one hand and a scowl on her face. You look like someone who just slept for 4 minutes and kissed a mistake, Carla said bluntly. Ava froze. Excuse me? Don't play coy. You and the mystery man were side by side all night, like a surgical power couple. Spill it. Ava sighed and flopped into the chair opposite her. He's not a consultant. No kidding. I figured that out when he accessed the master network console and routed oxygen from one wing to another without blinking. Ava hesitated. He's the CEO. Carla dropped her coffee. What? Michael Grant, the real one. He's been running the place in secret. Carla leaned back, hands on her head. This is a soap opera. I know. And you're in love with him? I don't know what I'm in, Ava said, rubbing her eyes. But it's complicated. He's not who I thought he was, but maybe he's more than I thought. Carla stared at her. So what now? You keep dating the billionaire boss who ghosted his way into the ER? Ava paused. I don't know if it's dating. Does he know you know? I confronted him last night. And we worked side by side for 8 hours in a trauma zone, and then sat on a floor and shared more honesty than I've had in years. Carla was silent for a beat. Then she smiled. Well, damn! He'd better not break your heart, because if he does, I'm stealing his ID badge and replacing his private office espresso with decaf. Ava laughed for the first time in days. It felt like oxygen after a storm, but across the hospital whispers had started. A junior nurse had seen Ava and Michael together. Someone from admin overheard his real name. The secret wasn't going to stay secret for much longer, and when it broke, it wouldn't just be his life on the line. It would be hers, too. The storm broke before sunrise. Ava woke to her phone buzzing on the nightstand. 10 notifications deep. Texts from coworkers, group chats blowing up, even an email from the hospital's PR department. She sat up, heart thudding, and tapped into the first link. Anonymous CEO of St. Gabriella's revealed. Shooting survivor identified as Billionaire hospital head. Her breath caught. There it was, in bold font and full-color photos. A side-by-side shot of Mike the consultant from security footage, and a clean-cut portrait of Michael Grant, healthcare magnate and notoriously private executive. Her name appeared in the subheadline. Nurse Ava Ramirez, hailed as a hero in last month's shooting, unknowingly saved the hospital's hidden leader. No, she whispered, fingers trembling. There was more. Rumors, accusations of favoritism, speculation about their relationship. Some anonymous source inside the hospital had apparently fed the press everything except the truth. She hadn't been prepared for this. Not the public exposure, not the twisting of her integrity, not the cold, creeping sense of betrayal. Her phone rang again. It was Michael. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Not yet. Michael stood in his suite, staring out the window, phone pressed to his ear. Voicemail again. He dropped it onto the desk, fingers tightening around the edge. The story had broken overnight, clearly fed by someone internal. The board was already in emergency meetings. Reporters were camped outside the hospital gates. Legal teams were drafting statements. His anonymity, carefully maintained for years, had crumbled in hours. But what hurt more was Ava not picking up. He understood why. She hadn't signed up for any of this. He had dragged her into the spotlight without her consent, and now she was paying the price. He opened his laptop and started drafting a press statement. But this one wouldn't be like the others. This one would be his voice. By the time Ava walked through the hospital doors that afternoon, eyes were on her like she'd stepped onto a red carpet instead of into a trauma center. Some faces were sympathetic, others were suspicious, and a few looked jealous. She ignored them all. She had patients to check on. She had work to do, but by the time she reached her locker, she found a folded piece of paper with her name on it. No envelope. No sender. She unfolded it. Room 417, 8 p.m. Tonight, you deserve the truth. Michael. At 8:04, Ava stepped into the quiet executive wing. The halls were silent, empty, like the calm before surgery. Room 417 was a private conference suite, but it had been transformed. Soft lighting, a table with takeout containers, 2 chairs, and Michael standing near the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled to his forearms. "I didn't know if you'd come," he said quietly. "I didn't either." She sat, cautiously. He handed her a plate. Pad Thai, her favorite. No candles, no wine, just food and space. She took it. They ate mostly in silence. Then finally, she spoke. "You didn't just hide from me. You hid from everyone." "I had to," he said. "The day my brother died, I swore I'd fix this place. But I knew if I showed my face, it would become about me, about money, power. So I worked from the shadows. It was the only way I could make real change." "And what about us?" she asked. "I never planned to meet you. I never planned to feel anything. But then you stepped into that bullet's path and flipped everything I thought I knew about bravery and honesty on its head." He met her eyes. "I never lied about how I felt. I just didn't tell you everything, and that's on me." Ava stood, heart hammering in her chest. "You should have trusted me." "I know," he said, "but I'm trusting you now." She took a slow breath, then closed the space between them. "I'm not promising anything," she said. "This isn't a fairy tale. This is my career, my life, and it just got hijacked. I'll make it right." "You'd better," she whispered. Then she kissed him. And this time it wasn't in the shadow of a lie. It was in the light of fragile truth. Outside the window, the city buzzed with rumors, questions, and headlines. But inside room 417, 2 people held still, finally real and finally honest. The next morning, Ava walked into St. Gabriella's with her head high, but her gut in knots. Her shift started like any other. Charts, vitals, care reports. But something had shifted. Eyes lingered longer. Conversations hushed when she entered the room. A few smiles disappeared when she met them. By noon, it was official. The Internal Review Committee had launched an ethics investigation. Ava sat across from HR Representative Helen Vargas, a woman with glasses like magnifying lenses and a voice devoid of tone. We received a concern regarding a possible conflict of interest, given your personal association with Mr. Grant, Helen said, shuffling papers. Mr. Grant is the CEO, Ava said, and I didn't know who he was when I saved him. We're not questioning your courage, Nurse Ramirez. The issue is access, influence. There are questions about how his involvement may have impacted your reassignment, your recent extended leave, and any resources you may have received during that time. I never asked for favors, Ava snapped. I earned every minute of my recovery and every shift I've worked since. Helen didn't flinch. Then we trust this process will clear your name. But until then, we'll need to place you on administrative leave. Ava stood slowly. Understood, she said coldly. But the sting hit hard. Michael found out 20 minutes later. What do you mean they suspended her? He said, storming into the boardroom. The executives looked shaken. This wasn't the Michael they knew, the calm, calculated strategist. This was the man who bled real emotion. She's not being suspended, Director Kwan clarified nervously. She's on precautionary leave. The press exposure, her relationship with you, it's compromising the hospital's image. She's the reason half the staff are still standing, Michael snapped. You want to talk about image? Try honoring the people who actually save lives. Michael, Edgar warned, you need to be careful. Any suggestion of favoritism or impropriety could trigger litigation or a media storm. Michael paced. Fine, then let's clear this up, fast. He reached for his phone. I'm going public with everything. Don't you dare, Edgar hissed. You do that, and you might take the whole hospital down with you. Michael paused, staring out at the city. I'll rebuild it, he said, but I won't let it chew up Ava just because it can't stomach the truth. Ava packed her locker slowly, still in disbelief. 1 month ago, she was saving lives without hesitation. Today, she felt like a liability. She zipped her bag shut, then froze. Carla stood at the doorway, expression unreadable. You heard? Ava asked. Yeah, I also heard the board's not handling it internally anymore. Some external review firms coming in. Ava sighed. Of course, make it as impersonal as possible. Carla leaned against the wall. So, what now? I'm going home. I wait. I lose my mind. Carla hesitated. I need to ask something, Ava, and I need you to be honest. Ava turned. Okay. Did you fall for him before you knew who he was? Ava didn't answer right away. Then, yes. Carla exhaled. Good, because if this whole thing was a power play and you got caught in it, it wasn't, Ava cut in. Whatever this is, it's real. Complicated, but real. Carla nodded slowly. Then make sure it's worth the fallout. That evening, Michael stood before a podium in the hospital's main lobby, surrounded by reporters, cameras, and staff. His PR team had warned against it. The board had begged him to cancel. He did it anyway. I'm Michael Grant, he began. I've been the CEO of St. Gabriella's for 2 years. I made the choice to lead anonymously after a personal tragedy. That decision was mine, and mine alone. Murmurs spread across the room. But this week, the spotlight shifted to someone else, someone who has only ever acted with integrity, courage, and care. Nurse Ava Ramirez saved my life. She has continued to save lives every day since, and now she's being punished for proximity. He looked into the cameras. This hospital must be better than that. It will be. And with that, he stepped down from the podium, not just figuratively, but literally. I'm removing myself from operational leadership until the review clears Ava's name. In the meantime, I'll be assisting under interim status, without executive privileges. The reporters erupted, the staff buzzed, the board panicked, but Michael didn't flinch, because he wasn't just fighting for the hospital anymore, he was fighting for her. Ava watched the press conference on her laptop, alone in her small apartment. The room was quiet, save for Michael's voice, calm and resolute as he stood before a sea of microphones and dismantled the lie he had built to protect the hospital and himself. I'm stepping down, he had said, and I stand by Nurse Ava Ramirez, whose only offense was acting with humanity and heart. Ava felt something crack open in her chest. He had done it. He gave up the very power he built for her. Her phone rang. Carla, you seeing this? Yeah, Ava whispered, and he just detonated a bomb in the boardroom, Carla said. Half the staff are rallying around you. The other half is just trying to keep up. Did he really step down? He did. Interim admin's already been named. But Ava, he didn't have to do that. I know. Then what are you going to do? Ava stared at the screen a moment longer before closing her laptop. I'm going to talk to him. The next morning she walked into the now accessible administrative suite. It looked different, less imposing without the hush-hush buzz of secrecy. She found him in a smaller conference room, papers in hand, suit jacket slung over a chair. No assistants, no advisors, just Michael. He looked up and froze when he saw her. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said. I wasn't sure either. She stepped closer. You didn't have to take the fall. I didn't do it for guilt, he replied. I did it because what's happening to you is wrong, because you're the kind of person I wanted to build this hospital around, and I nearly destroyed you instead. Ava crossed her arms. You lied to me. You put me in the middle of something I didn't ask for, but you also told the truth, and that matters. His eyes flickered. So what does that mean for us? It means, she said, voice soft, we start over. Clean, no lies, no shadows. But it also means I don't trust you yet, not fully. He nodded. I'll earn it. Day by day. She smiled, just slightly, and in that tiny moment the storm seemed to lift, just a little. 3 days later, the hospital was running on nerves. The interim director, a no-nonsense numbers guy named Brett Carlson, had already started making sweeping budget reviews. He didn't know the staff, didn't care. He focused on metrics, not morale. And it was showing. Supply orders were stalled. Staffing requests ignored. Nurses were being floated across departments with no prep or context. Then came the collapse. A 10-year-old girl named Nia went into cardiac arrest in the pediatric ICU. The code was called. Ava, back on hospital grounds but not officially reinstated, was nearby. She heard the call. She ran. She got there before most of the crash team, and she knew what to do. She started compressions, called out dosages, and coordinated with the charge nurse. Within minutes, the girl's rhythm stabilized. When the lead physician finally arrived, Ava was already debriefing the parents. Later that day, an emergency board meeting was called. The board had reviewed the situation, including the ICU incident, and issued a statement. Pending final ethics review, Nurse Ava Ramirez is hereby reinstated to full active status. There was applause across the nurses' lounge when the news broke, but Ava just sat still, hands folded, because she knew this wasn't about applause. It was about responsibility, and she wasn't finished. That night she found Michael in the staff garden, the quiet place between wings where people went to breathe when the world inside got too loud. "Hey," she said, sitting beside him. He looked tired, but I was relieved. "You saved a life today," he said. "So did you," she replied. They sat in silence for a long while. Then he spoke. "I want you to come with me. Help lead something new. A foundation. Outreach programs. Community trauma support." "You're asking me to leave the floor." "I'm asking you to expand it," he said. "Take everything you are and help me spread it beyond these walls." Ava didn't answer right away. But she didn't say no. Ava needed space. So when a temporary relief assignment opened at a rural clinic 2 hours outside the city, she took it. No second guessing, no goodbyes. She packed a duffel, kissed Carla on the cheek, and left a note on Michael's desk. "I need time to remember who I was before all this. I'll be back. A." The Evergreen Valley Clinic was nestled between forest and farmland. It smelled like cedar, not antiseptic. Patients called her Miss Ava, with wide eyes and grateful smiles. There were no reporters, no politics, just medicine and healing. The days were long but grounding. She stitched up tractor injuries, comforted flu-stricken toddlers, and consulted on aging patients who didn't trust city hospitals. And every evening, she sat on the porch of the small staff cabin, watching the sun set over the fields. In those quiet hours, she didn't feel like a hospital pawn. She felt human again. Still, she couldn't stop thinking about him, Michael's voice, his sacrifice, the way he'd looked at her, not as a savior, but as an equal. Her heart tugged with every sunrise, and she realized it wasn't just St. Gabriella's she missed. It was a fight, and him. At the clinic's week mark, she received a visitor. He didn't call ahead, just showed up. Michael stood in the doorway of the clinic's small break room, his jacket dusted with pollen from the countryside, a weary smile on his face. "You ran away," he said. "I didn't run," she replied. "I recalibrated." He nodded. "Fair. You're supposed to be fixing the city, not stalking the countryside. I came to tell you something." He reached into his pocket and unfolded a letter. "It's from the board. They voted. I'm officially reinstated, but not without conditions." Ava raised a brow. "Conditions?" "They want a co-chair to oversee the hospital's new ethics and outreach division. Someone with integrity, backbone, frontline credibility." He looked at her. "They want you." Ava blinked. "They said that." They said, "Someone like Ava Ramirez. I told them there's no one like you." That night, she didn't sleep much. But when the morning sun crept across the wooden cabin floor, she knew her answer. While Ava was rediscovering herself in the quiet of pine-scented mornings, Michael was dodging daggers back home. His return to leadership had sparked a firestorm. The interim director, Brett Carlson, wasn't going quietly. "You destabilized the hospital," Brett told the board. "Brought scandal, leaked identity, disrupted protocol, all to protect one nurse." "She's not just one nurse," Michael snapped. "She represents everything this hospital should be." "Is this still personal?" Brett pushed. "Or is it emotional?" Michael didn't respond, but the silence said plenty. The board was split. Half respected Michael's integrity, half feared the optics, and Brett saw his opportunity. He filed a formal challenge, a motion to unseat Michael based on breach of executive trust. A hearing was set. Whispers spread like wildfire. Donors called. Legal reps scrambled. Even staff morale took a hit. Some feared another transition. Others resented the shadow leadership, saying the hospital needed a face, not a myth. Michael tried to stay focused, drafting reforms, refining ethics procedures, and implementing Ava's community-centered recovery models. But without her beside him, the work felt heavier and lonelier. Then, 2 days before the hearing, he received a message from her. "Tell the board to make room for one more chair. I'm coming back." When Ava walked back into St. Gabriella's, dressed in slate-gray scrubs and a confident stride, the hallway stilled. Staff stopped what they were doing. Heads turned. Someone clapped, then someone else. And within seconds, the corridor erupted in applause. She didn't cry, but her hands trembled as Michael met her at the end of the hallway. "You came back," he said. She looked at him straight and sure. "This fight isn't yours alone anymore." The hearing room on the 14th floor of St. Gabriella's was sterile and cold, an ironic place to determine the future of the hospital's most passionate advocate. Michael sat before the board, a stack of evidence and reforms in front of him. Ava sat to his right, not as a defendant, but as co-chair of ethics and outreach, wearing her badge and a steely expression. Across from them stood Brett Carlson, flushed with false calm, his voice smooth as oil. "Let's be clear," Brett began. "This is not personal. This is about governance. Mr. Grant compromised hospital integrity. He misled staff, operated under a false identity, and created an environment ripe for liability. All for what? An emotional entanglement?" Murmurs buzzed around the table. Michael remained calm. "I operated anonymously to rebuild trust in this institution from the inside. The same system that let my brother die. I took risks, yes, but never at the expense of patient care." "And the nurse you're now intimately involved with?" Brett asked sharply. "Was that part of your internal restructuring?" "Enough," Ava said, rising. "This is a character assassination, not a hearing." "Then let's talk about character," Brett said, flipping open a file. "Exhibit 7B, confidential patient testimony claiming Ava received unauthorized access to medication during her recovery." Ava's jaw clenched. It was a lie, but well-timed. Michael stood. "This is desperation, and we both know it." The board members exchanged glances. The room grew tense. And then, boom! The building trembled. The lights flickered. An alarm blared through the PA system. "Emergency, mass casualty incident en route. Prepare ER and trauma units." Without hesitation, Ava was on her feet. "Meeting's over. Time to work." And just like that, every suit in the room got to witness who really led the heart of St. Gabriella's. A fuel tanker had collided with a commuter tram just outside city limits. 30 injured, multiple critical. Ambulances were on the way. Within minutes, the hospital transformed into a war zone of controlled chaos. Ava changed into scrubs in under 60 seconds. Michael rolled up his sleeves and started triaging patients at intake. Board members stood frozen in the admin wing, watching their executives become soldiers. "Room 6 needs respiratory support," a nurse shouted. "I'm on it," Ava called, running. Blood streaked floors, sirens screamed, burn victims poured in. The trauma center overflowed. A boy with a collapsed lung coded on the table. Ava cracked his chest open with steady hands, barking orders with flawless clarity. Michael redirected backup generators when the grid threatened to overload. They didn't look like lovers. They looked like leaders. And the staff saw it, felt it, followed it. By dawn, 29 patients were stabilized, 1 in surgery, no deaths, a miracle. Ava sat on a bench outside the OR wing, blood on her gloves, sweat clinging to her brow. Michael sat beside her. She didn't say anything at first. Then, "You okay?" He nodded. "You. Ask me tomorrow." They both laughed, exhausted, battered, but alive. Together. The board reconvened the next day. No suits, no slideshows, just experience and action. "We watched you both lead a life-saving response," said Director Kwan. "This hospital didn't survive because of protocols. It survived because of people. You." "Then let us keep doing it," Ava said. "Together, transparently, with reform, not secrecy." The board murmured, then voted. Unanimously, Michael Grant was reinstated as CEO, this time publicly. Ava Ramirez was formally confirmed as co-chair of Ethics and Clinical Outreach. The announcement went live by noon. News headlines flipped overnight. Hospital hero duo saves dozens in wake of crisis. Anonymous CEO steps into the light with former nurse turned executive partner. That evening, St. Gabriella's lobby filled with staff, patients, families, all clapping as Ava and Michael stood side by side, hands linked but not hidden. Carla stood off to the side, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "Okay, I hate admitting I'm wrong, but you two might just be the real deal." Ava smiled, squeezing Michael's hand. She wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was a voice, a leader, a survivor, and for the first time in a long time, she felt whole. The press conference was held in the atrium of St. Gabriella's, bright, open, with natural light cascading across the marble floors. Cameras lined the perimeter, microphones clustered like flowers on a podium that now bore 2 nameplates. Michael Grant, CEO, Ava Ramirez, co-chair, Ethics and Outreach. Michael adjusted his tie as Ava straightened her blouse. "Still time to fake a fire alarm," he whispered. Ava grinned. "Too late. You already signed your own headlines." They stepped onto the stage to a round of applause. Not from staff this time, but the media. Respect, curiosity, even awe rippled through the crowd. Michael spoke first. "I spent 2 years trying to lead from the shadows. I thought that anonymity would shield the mission. But I was wrong. Real change demands transparency, accountability, and sometimes vulnerability." He paused. "I wouldn't be here without Nurse Ava Ramirez. And frankly, this hospital wouldn't be either." Ava stepped forward. Her voice, confident and clear, filled the room. I never expected to be at a podium beside my CEO, or to be thrown into the center of a firestorm, but I believe in what this hospital can become. We're building something better, not because we have to, but because we want to, and because the people we serve deserve it. The flash of cameras ignited. Journalists fired questions. Are you in a relationship? How long have you known each other? Was there ever misconduct between you and the staff? Michael lifted a hand. We'll answer what we can, but this isn't about romance. This is about rebuilding trust and doing it together. Ava smiled, knowing they were towing a fragile line. But for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like she was balancing alone. The next day brought something neither of them expected, a letter, hand-delivered, no return address. Michael opened it in his office while Ava reviewed a stack of patient feedback reports nearby. His brow furrowed. The letter was brief. You think you're safe because you told the truth? You built this hospital with dirty hands. Some of us remember how it started, and we're ready to burn it down again. Attached was a photo, a grainy image of Michael from 4 years ago outside a courtroom, standing with his brother, just hours before Lucas died. Ava looked up as Michael's silence grew too long. What is it? He handed her the letter. She read it slowly. Her expression hardened. You know who sent this? I have a few guesses, he said, but I didn't think they'd come this far. Michael, this isn't just a threat. This is someone who knows everything, someone who was there. He nodded. A former partner, board investor. After I exposed the malpractice cover-up, I cut him out. He lost millions. Swore revenge. And now he's back. Looks like it. Ava folded the paper. Then we prepare. For what? For war, if we have to. Michael exhaled. We just rebuilt this hospital, he said. Ava looked at him, her eyes clear. Then we protect it. Later that evening, Michael sat in the records archive, digging through files that hadn't seen daylight in years, contracts, old board memos, legal drafts that proved how deeply the corruption ran before he cleaned house. Meanwhile, Ava made legal calls to hospital security, even to Edgar Lynn, who had been quiet since stepping back. She was calm, methodical. She wasn't just reacting. She was defending something that mattered. At 2 a.m., Michael found her in the admin wing, reviewing surveillance access logs. You should sleep, he said. So should you. They didn't argue further. He walked over, rested his hand on hers. They stood in silence. Enemies from the past were knocking again. But this time, they wouldn't be caught off guard. They weren't just CEOs and nurses anymore. They were guardians of something bigger than themselves. The boardroom was full, not just with executives and lawyers, but with nurses, residents, volunteers. They weren't there to observe. They were there because Ava invited them. She stood at the center of the long oak table, wearing her badge and a blazer, not to blend in, but to lead. Michael sat just to her left, silent, proud. Before I speak, Ava began, I want to remind everyone in this room that we don't exist to impress shareholders. We exist to serve patients, to protect staff, and to make sure what happened in the past, before Michael rebuilt this place, never happens again. Some of the older board members shifted in their seats. She continued, We've made progress. but progress without protection is fragile. I propose a new set of reforms: frontline representation in ethics reviews, whistleblower security expansion, and guaranteed union support for any staff member flagged during investigations without evidence. There were murmurs, tension. Then Director Kwan spoke. You're asking to build a firewall between executives and accountability. I'm asking to build trust, Ava countered, and you're welcome to oppose that, but you'll be doing it in front of every pair of eyes that keep this hospital alive. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was respect. For Ava, for her fight, for her fire. Later, Michael pulled her aside. I've seen you in scrubs, in blood, in boardrooms, but I think that was the most powerful I've ever seen you. Ava smiled, tired but steady. I wasn't just speaking for myself. I was speaking for everyone who's ever been afraid to use their voice. Now they know they can. And now, she said, we make sure no one tries to take that away. But someone already was, and they were just getting started. The hospital was in the middle of lunch rounds when it happened. Every monitor in the building flickered, then it turned black, then flashed a single message. St. Gabriella's is rotten at its core. Watch what comes next. Michael was in the middle of reviewing ICU construction updates when the system crashed. He sprinted to the IT wing. Ava was already there, flanked by 2 techs trying to restore access. Cyber intrusion, one of them said. External access point. But the user credentials match internal level clearance. Michael's stomach dropped. Who? He demanded. We're still tracking it, but it was someone who knew how to use the old CEO override system from before your security updates. Ava stepped back, her eyes narrowing. That means it was someone who was here before the reform. Michael nodded grimly. One of the old investors, or a mole. Within an hour, operations had stabilized, but the damage was done. Patient trust faltered, media inquiries returned, and the board began whispering again. I have to call an emergency vote, Director Kwan said that evening. The others want to assess whether this attack was provoked by your return, Michael. Ava stood beside him. So he tells the truth, rebuilds your hospital, saves it from collapse, and now you question him for someone else's sabotage. Kwan didn't flinch. That's politics. Michael touched Ava's shoulder gently. Let them vote. Ava looked at him. And if they vote no? Then we walk, he said simply. Together. The vote happened the next morning. Each board member cast their decision by ballot, silent, unreadable. Then Kwan stood, envelope in hand. The board has voted, he said. A breathless pause. 7 in favor of reinstating Michael Grant permanently as CEO. 1 opposed. Motion passed. Applause rippled. Ava exhaled. Michael looked over the room, not with triumph, but with resolve. But even in that moment of victory, he saw the shadow at the back of the room. A man in a dark coat, gone before anyone could stop him. A ghost from the past. The enemy hadn't given up, but neither would they. It started with a single clinic, built inside a decommissioned church on the south side of the city, where ambulances rarely went and insurance rarely mattered. St. Gabriella's Community Outreach Initiative was live. And at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Ava stood in front of the crowd. Patients, volunteers, students, even city officials, all watching her. Michael stepped back to give her the moment. "This isn't just about medicine," Ava said into the microphone. "It's about access, about people who were told they didn't matter finally having a place to go and someone who will listen." Applause followed. Cameras flashed. But what the media didn't capture was the work behind the scenes. Michael had funded most of the project himself. Ava had handpicked every nurse, coordinator, and care tech from former colleagues and reform-minded students. Together, they weren't just healing patients, they were healing a broken system. Later that day, as they toured the makeshift pediatric wing, Michael leaned in. "You ever think we'd get here?" "No," Ava said, smiling, "but we did." He took her hand, discreetly, just a touch. "Still scared?" he asked. "Always," she said, "but I trust you now." He kissed her forehead, and for once, neither of them had to hide. But outside the clinic, in a black sedan parked across the street, a man watched through binoculars. He lowered them, lit a cigarette, and muttered, "They think they've won." Then he drove away. St. Gabriella's hosted its first annual Healing Hands Gala that weekend, a celebration of reform, recovery, and the heroes who made it happen. The city's elite packed into the ballroom, media crews buzzed, donors raised glasses. But all eyes were on Ava Ramirez, who stood at the top of the stage in an elegant navy gown, stunned by the lights, the applause, and the crystal plaque in her hands. St. Gabriella's Medal of Courage. It sparkled under the spotlight. Michael, dressed in a tailored black tux, gave the introduction. She stepped between a bullet and a stranger. She stayed when most would have walked away, and she taught me, and all of us, that real leadership doesn't demand attention, it earns respect. The crowd rose to their feet, a standing ovation. Ava blinked hard, overwhelmed, not by the glamour but by how far she'd come. Later, under the twinkle of chandeliers and the hum of jazz music, she and Michael stood on the balcony, looking out over the city. "Think they'll let me keep the award if I swear during tomorrow's shift?" Ava jokes. "I'll pull some strings," Michael said, but then he stiffened. Ava followed his gaze. A man across the room, graying hair, sharp jaw, expensive coat, locked eyes with them, then turned and walked away. "Who was that?" she asked. Michael didn't answer at first, and then, "The reason I went into hiding in the first place." "Your old partner?" Michael nodded. "Gerald Pierce. He lost everything when I exposed the malpractice scandal, and he's not done." Ava clenched her jaw. "You want me to talk to security?" "No," Michael said. "I want us to finish what we started." She slipped her hand into his. "Then let's do it." Together? Inside the ballroom, Gerald Pierce sipped from a champagne flute, unnoticed among the crowd. He didn't clap, he didn't smile, but he watched, and he waited, because while Ava and Michael had won the trust of the hospital, he was about to test the trust of the public. The attack came the following Monday. A front-page exposé splashed across every major outlet inside the secret empire, how Michael Grant's silence enabled a culture of corruption. The piece was slick, weaponized, carefully edited quotes, blurred timelines, fabricated sources. Gerald Pierce had pulled strings in dark corners, and now he was tugging the whole system down. Michael faced the board by noon. "I'll address it publicly," he said. I won't hide. But this article paints you as complicit, Director Kwan said, rubbing his temples. Even with no proof, the public will demand accountability. I built this place back from the edge, Michael said. If I have to defend that in front of a microphone, I will. But before the press conference could begin, Ava stepped into the room. I'll speak with him, she said, but not just to defend him. Everyone turned. I want to announce something, too. Michael blinked. You do. Ava nodded, eyes burning with resolve. You once asked me to expand the floor, to go beyond these walls. I'm ready. Let's do it. Clinics, scholarships, training programs for rural hospitals. If people think we're hiding something, then let's show them everything. Michael's lips parted. You're saying yes? I'm saying let's build it together. Officially, no shadows. For the first time in days, Michael smiled, not in triumph, in partnership. That afternoon, standing side by side at the press conference, Ava and Michael shared more than a rebuttal. They shared a vision, no denials, just the truth. We won't let fear dictate our mission, Ava said into the cameras. We've made mistakes, but we've also made miracles, and we're just getting started. It wasn't a PR stunt. It was the beginning. The fallout was less explosive than expected. Gerald Pierce's article drew outrage, but was quickly discredited. Multiple whistleblowers came forward in support of Michael and Ava. The documents Pierce submitted were found to be doctored. Within a week, his reputation had collapsed. But Ava didn't celebrate. She focused. She and Michael officially launched the Ramirez Grant Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to expanding medical access and ethical reform across under-resourced hospitals nationwide. They held town halls, met with medical schools, partnered with grassroots organizations. Ava traveled to clinics and campuses. She wasn't just a nurse or a leader anymore. She was a symbol. Michael stood beside her, but never ahead of her. They no longer wore masks, no false names, just a shared mission. And love. One evening, after returning from a rural training center, Ava found Michael waiting at her apartment. No tux, no press, just him holding a small box. Her heart raced. He opened it. Inside wasn't a ring. It was a stethoscope, silver engraved. For the woman who gave me a second life and a second chance. Ava laughed softly. Not what I expected. I'm not proposing marriage, he said. I'm proposing a purpose, a future, together. Not because we need each other, but because we choose each other. Ava took the stethoscope and nodded. I choose that too. A year later, Ava walked into the cafe where everything began. The same seat, the same corner booth, but no fear, no trauma, only peace. Michael arrived minutes later carrying 2 coffees, hers, with vanilla almond milk. His black, no sugar. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Ava smiled. Do you ever think about how insane this all was? All the time, he said. You jumped in front of a bullet. I spent years pretending not to exist. And now we're running national reform campaigns. Wild. He reached across the table, intertwining his fingers with hers. But I wouldn't change a thing. She squeezed his hand. Me neither. Outside, the world moved on, fast, loud, complicated. But inside this quiet space, they had finally arrived at something simple, something true. Not CEO and nurse, Not a survivor and stranger, just Michael and Ava. Two people who risked everything and built something stronger from the scars. Together, the end.